Hello and welcome to the Pulpit Fiction Podcast, the lectionary podcast for preachers, seekers, and Bible geeks. This is episode 659 for February 8th, 2026. It's the fifth Sunday after Epiphany of Year A. Today, our gospel reading is Matthew 5, verses 13 through 20 as we continue the second part of the Beatitudes, that you are the salt of the earth. Our second reading is Isaiah 58, verses 1 through 12, a sort of pre-Ash Wednesday reading, as we hear, raise up your voice, raise them up like trumpets. And then our epistle reading is 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 1 through 16. I am Robb McCoy, United Methodist pastor here in Rock Island, Illinois. And I'm joined, as always, by my good friend and co-host from the shining shores of Crystal Lake, Eric Fistler. How are you doing, buddy?
Good. I got my new glasses, for those of you who are watching. I'm finally moved into the realm of progressive lenses. And so which is the fancy new, for those of you who do not wear glasses, that is what we call bifocals now. They are now progressive lenses. I'm supposed to wear them so that I get used to them. And anyway, it's a thing. I haven't worn glasses in 15 years, so it's a bit to get used to. But
yeah, I use my readers, and I'm kind of in between. Like, they really truly are readers, because like I don't really need them for screens. But like typing, it can't hurt, and like writing and reading. So I'll take mine on and off about 30 times over the course of the podcast, probably, and I have them laying around all over the place.
The problem is I'm so used to only wearing sunglasses that I was just leading a Bible study, and as I was talking to people, like, I'm so used to realizing like, oh, I'm wearing glasses and not wanting to be rude, so I take off my glasses, like, because I think they're sunglasses. Then I'm like, oh no, these are normal glasses. I can leave them on while talking to people. But anywho,
yeah.
But no, things are good. Wanted to say thank you to so many folks who reached out. We are going to keep sharing good conferences that are coming up. We've got two that we want to share since Festival Homiletics isn't happening. The first one is a preaching conference put on by the Institute of Liturgical Studies at Valparaiso University. This year's theme is the Feast of Creation, Liturgy as Creation Groans. It's April 13th through the 15th. You can still go. Now, it's a pan-Lutheran event. Rob, I had never heard that phrase before, pan-Lutheran, but, God bless them.
I know, but I mean, pan-Methodist, I know. So
right.
I can infer it's not just a bunch of Lutherans with pan flutes running around.
Yeah, we don't have pan UCC. It's just we're small but fierce. But anyway, so that means it's ELCA, it's LCMS. Apparently, none of those Wisconsin Synod folks are invited. But I'm just kidding.
I bet they're part of the pan Lutheran.
I'm sure that they are. But there's a lot of great speakers that are talking about it, specifically about the groaning of creation. So you can check that out at valpo.edu. Go to their Institute of Liturgical Studies. And again, look for that preaching. There's a lot of preaching workshop, great keynotes. That's in April. And then there's another one that's way up north in Toronto, Canada. It is the Lester Randall Preaching Fellowship. It's every year. This is in late October. So now there's it's a great opportunity to kind of head up to our far north anyway. Or if you're outside of the U.S. and are looking for a preaching thing without wanting to travel to the U.S., then check that out. Again, that's the Lester Randall Preaching Fellowship. It happens in October. They haven't released the dates yet, but go to Lester Randall. That's LesterRandall, 2 R's, 2 L's, LesterRandall.com. And thanks, Kate Jones, for that. And thank you, Kate Jones, for that. And thanks to Merritt Johnson for the word on that one at Valpo EDU. So a couple conferences to check out. None of them are sponsors, friends, for the show.
So and these aren't endorsements. We don't really know anything about them. We haven't been to them and experienced them. But it's just good to throw them out there to see if, see what's available, and maybe they're really cool, and maybe they're not, but you can't know until you try.
Yeah. And then just one more shout out. If you want to go to that preaching retreat, again, there's a preaching retreat that's happening at the Ghost Ranch. That's the first week. I'm trying to think. Yeah, it's the first week of August 3rd through the 7th. And that's one with working preacher, Sermon Brainwave, Matt Skinner, Carolyn Lewis, and Cody Sanders. It looks awesome. Find that out, ghostranch.org. Look for that preacher's retreat. So
Yeah. And I'll throw this out there too. I remember seeing Diana Butler Bass is putting together a travel pilgrimage.
oh,
Like I said, I don't remember where now. I should have looked it up before I brought it up, but I remember seeing that and thinking, oh, that would be pretty cool to go to like England or something like that with Diana Butler Bass. But
yeah,
anyway.
absolutely. Well, I tell you what, I'll try to look that up while you tell them about our new exciting survey. All right.
Yeah, so it's been a little while. Every once in a while, we do these listener surveys or user surveys, I should say, and put one together. It's just a Google Doc. It's a little longer than usual, but we're going to share it as much as we can. We would love for you to fill it out. Everybody that fills it out at the end is able to put in their information and be entered into a drawing for a prize. We're going to throw in $100 gift card to either Amazon gift card, or $100 gift to Sanctified Art to be able to spend there with their incredible resources and prints and stuff like that. If you don't want to support Amazon, you can pick which prize you want. So there's a lot of information in it. I think it takes probably about a 10-minute survey. But we're wanting to learn about you. We're wanting to learn what you want from the podcast and other possible resource ideas. Do you want to do a preaching retreat with us or something like that, or lots of things like that? So we're going to be sharing that in our social media, in the email. We don't have a direct link to it. There'll be a link on the website as well. It's a Google Doc, so it's going to be it's not going to be an easy website, I don't think, to share. We might be able to figure something out. Anyway, look for it. It's coming up. And we'd love for you to fill it out and just let us know what you think about. Let us know about you, and let us know about what you think about the show and what you want to see from us in the future.
All right. So, Rob, I'm not sure if this is what you were thinking of, but she is doing a Diana Butler Bass, going back to that thing. She is going to be doing an Ireland retreat. It's a travel thing in Ireland from July 7th to July 14th. And again, it's all around Ireland and doing all sorts of fun things. And you can do that with Diana Butler Bass. Looks like there's all kinds of cool stuff. So you can check that out at IrelandRetreats.com. And then just search for upcoming retreats you'll find with special guest Diana Butler Bass. Looks pretty cool.
Yep, that's what I thought of. That's what I saw.
Yeah. All right. Well, right now, it's time to jump into a little bit of the good news. So let's do that.
Very few comparatively know what is the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Good news, everyone.
All right, then. Our good news this week comes, again, as Robin said at the top of the show. It's the next part of the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5:13-20. This is the Common English Bible. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt loses its saltiness, how will it become salty again? It's good for nothing except to be thrown away and trampled underneath people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city on top of a hill can't be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a basket. Instead, they put it on top of the lampstand, and it shines on all who are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before all people, so they can see good things you do and praise your Father who is in heaven. Don't begin to think that I have come to do away with the law and the prophets. I haven't come to do away with them, but to fulfill them. I say to you very seriously that as long as heaven and earth exist, neither the smallest letter nor even the smallest stroke of a pen will be erased from the law until everything there becomes a reality. Therefore, whoever ignores one of the least of these commands and teaches others to do the same will be called the lowest in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever keeps these commands and teaches people to keep them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. I say to you that unless your righteousness is greater than the righteousness of the legal experts and the Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven.
All right, so here it is, part 2. This is, I think, part 2 of the Sermon on the Mount, part 2 of a sort of 2-part series between last week with the Beatitudes and this with the continuation, really, of Jesus talking to the people and sharing with them that they matter. Right. Like, and that's oversimplified. But I think understanding the context of who and when and where this is happening is such a huge part of this, right? Because he's calling people the salt of the earth that never would have considered, that aren't considered the salt of the earth, right? We have this understanding nowadays of being the salt of the earth is sort of, the old guy you knew that worked a job, for 40 years and was quiet and friendly and just, kind of kept to himself, but, worked hard and helped people when he needed and that kind of stuff. We have this very idyllic understanding of salt of the earth, but that's not who Jesus, that's been shaped by this phrase, right? Jesus saying you are the salt of the earth to a group of people trapped in poverty, to people, his followers in this moment would have been, living in the sticks, under Roman oppression, under Roman occupation. These are not the people that would have been considered the salt of the earth or the light of the world. And I think just from the first step of just understanding, like, this is Jesus calling a people who don't matter. You matter. And not only do you matter, but you are what makes this world good. And that just simple message, I think, can get lost if we forget when and where this is happening.
Yeah, I think so. And looking at those pieces, I think these two pieces, salt and light, I'm wondering, Rob, if they can sometimes be taken a little bit out of context, into what I feel like Jesus is making kind of a very simple analogy here, or piece. You are the salt of the earth, right? Do what you are created to do, right? Otherwise, you're useless. You're like dust. I think the tricky thing about this is, I think you're right. Some of the misunderstanding of what the salt of the earth is and who the salt of the earth, and that phrase, people being called salt of the earth, came out of this. This didn't come out of that phrase. I think is a good thing for us to remember. But the second piece too is also we know a lot more about salt than necessarily Jesus would have known. So, example, I've heard people say, like, listen, like, what does he mean if salt loses its saltiness? Like, salt, that's the point of salt. It can't lose its saltiness. Right. And we have stuff in the show notes where we talk about the fact, like, well, salt is a preservative. What is he saying about a preservative? Is he saying, like, we shouldn't preserve the status quo? We just got done with the Beatitudes saying that we shouldn't preserve the status quo. So maybe what he's saying is that we should lose our saltiness, right? And be cast out, which he just got done saying to people that we should, we should be reviled. Blessed are you who are scorned and reviled and cast aside for the sake of the kingdom. I hear all those pieces, and I'm sure if you listen to the past podcasts, Rob, I'm sure I and both of us have made those ideas. I think these are statements that we take at face value. I mean, I've heard the same thing with, don't put a light under a bushel, and people saying, but if you put it under a bushel, it'll set the bushel on fire, and that's what we need to do is burn down the status quo. I hear what you're saying. I think you're stretching it farther than it was ever meant to be stretched. And so what does it mean to say, what is salt? It is a thing that, yes, it preserves, but it also gives flavor. But I think here, what he's talking about is the essential the essential aspect of salt is its saltiness, right? It is its ability to do what it was created to do. And part of it is, what are we created to do, but to follow in the way of Jesus Christ, to love God, love others, and love yourself. And same thing with the light of the world, right? We're allowing the light of Christ, the light to shine through us in those pieces. I'm not sure deeper unpacking is helpful or not.
Sometimes I think it's even simpler than that. Like, salt, what is salt? Really valuable.
Yeah. Well,
right?
yeah.
I mean, it's the building block of civilization, and, and could be to the point of, being worth your salt, right? It was almost a payment, right? I mean, for some, it could be, you work for bread or you work for salt. It was something small that could almost be used in place of money. And I think there's an aspect of this that's just saying, you are valuable. You are important. You who are downtrodden and stepped on and marginalized, where people think nothing good could come from here. No, you are the salt of the earth. And I think, again, you could labor the different, functions of salt, and they all work in different ways depending on how you want to use it. But I think to a certain extent, it's just a matter of one thing that I think you don't want to lose track of is it's just valuable,
Yeah.
um, and that is worth, that matters, right? To people that are devalued or even dehumanized, that can be a really powerful thing. Um,
And it
yeah,
makes life possible. It is
right.
life-giving too. So I love that value piece. I think the idea of it being life-giving is also could be, I mean, as a sense of a preservative, as all those things, especially in the ancient world. I think that more than this idea that he's making some kind of idea of preserving the status quo, I think perhaps more it's about the idea that your life is valuable, and then what do you do to make life possible?
Mm,
I
mhm,
came that they may have life and have it abundantly. I know I'm gospel jumping there, but still.
yeah. Well, and this is also funny too, not even gospel jumping, to just Sermon on the Mount jumping. Skip ahead a chapter, and we hear Jesus say, "Don't pray in public," right? But here he's saying, "Let your light shine upon the world." And I think it's, we're not going to get that far in the Sermon on the Mount, but I think it's important to remember that this isn't about showy religion, right? I mean, because he gets to that part. Being the light on a lamp, hanging your light on the lampstand is, it's a point of pride. It's a point of joy. It's a point of, who you are is worth seeing. You hold your head up, throw your shoulders back, and know that you are, you are valued. Again, that's different than what, in a little bit he'll warn against, heaping up phrases like the Gentiles do, or praying in public spaces so everyone thinks you're holy, or giving alms and blowing your trumpet so that everybody sees how generous you are. That kind of thing is about that's a motive. There he's talking about the motivation of self-aggrandizement and making yourself look good. Here he's talking about, just, again, this is earlier in the sermon, right? So this is the foundation of, you're blessed even though you're hungry. You're blessed even though you're mourning. Here you are valuable even though the world would say you're not.
Right.
And that is the foundation. This is still part of it. He's laying the foundation of the Sermon on the Mount, and he's laying the foundation of what it is to be the kingdom of heaven. And part of being in part of the kingdom of heaven is realizing you matter here.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is, um again, maybe people won't be thinking that because their biblical literacy isn't that adept, and being like, wait a second, you're about to say, but I think that's still a good thing to hold on to.
I was talking with, we have our cantatas coming up, and I was working with some of the kids just on working on projection and talking and things like that. And we were just talking about speaking. And it reminded me, one of the pieces that I say to them is, we need to hear your voice because your voice is valuable.
Yeah, your voice matters.
So
Yeah.
if we need your voice. So it's not about you saying this because I want it to sound good or things. Your voice, what you have to say, matters to us. And whether that's in the middle of a cantata or whether it's at any time, like, we need to hear what you have to say. It is valuable and important. And I think that's a powerful piece as we start talking about, letting your light shine before others. Robb Myalis points out, I think, is an interesting piece, especially because next week is Transfiguration Sunday. The only person who shines is Jesus, right? In the moment of transfiguration, it says that he was shining, or at least in the New Testament, the Gospel of Matthew. I think Moses's face shines right after
Sure.
being with. But what does that look like? So we shine by, again, not just because we're valuable, but again, what does it look like to allow that light of Christ to shine through us? What is that light that we want to shine through us? What are those things that we do to allow that to amplify? What are those best parts of us? And I think that that's the piece where you're saying, don't pray and don't do those other things. That's not the light of Christ. That's my own lifting myself up over and against and above others. Or if anything, a lot of it is my own self-doubt and questioning that feels like it needs to be propped up so that other people can see how good I am because I question my self-worth. I think, I believe that lie that says I'm only as valuable as what other people think or say about me. So that's why they all need to see me, fasting. They all need to see me praying with loud trumpets and doing those things.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a great quote here from David Lowe's Working Preacher article talking about psychological studies with children and how important affirmations are for them. He said children, to put it another way, become what they are named. Call a child bad long enough and he or she will believe you and act bad. Call a child worthless or unlovable, shameful, and eventually he or she, all of us, will live in the name we've been assigned. In the same way, call us good or useful, dependable, helpful, or worthwhile, and we will grow up into that identity and behavior as well. You are what you are named. You know, I think we talked about this not that long ago. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. The names will shape me and form me. And it's a horrible saying, right? I mean, I get it. There's an element of that to help people, develop thick skin and tough skin. But the reality is what you are called matters. And you are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. You are the name which you choose matters. You are the name, trusting people's name, matters. And lifting up the light. I remember I feel like I've told the story before of when we did Godspell a few years ago in one of our churches, and there's a great number in that. You are the light of the world, right? And the way we did it, our Jesus went out into the audience and just found somebody and had them stand up, and then everybody on the stage pointed at the person. And so when we said, "You are the light of the world," we pointed that to them, and they received that. And I remember an intermission one time, someone saying, wow, nobody's ever called me the light of the world before. How powerful that was.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things that we don't forget. And here's the thing. Yes, it's powerful for kids, but as you just pointed out, Rob, it's powerful for adults too.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that's the piece, which is like, we forget that those messages, yes, it's important that kids need to hear it, but it's important again and again that adults need to hear it. And Lowe's kind of talks about that, but that's also an important piece for us to remember that. So absolutely. Yeah, I feel like these are two pieces that so many people know and are working on. Like they know this, you are the light of the world, you are the salt of the earth. I think unpacking that and saying what are the ways in which we embody that, what are the ways in which we live into that. Emily, my amazing colleague Emily Davis, just gave a great sermon this last week on Martin Luther King's sermon, and talks about being a drum major for justice. And I think one of the powerful pieces about that aspect of that he talks about is actually not the idea of needing to be the brightest light, needing to be the saltiest salt, needing to be the one leader, but the one rather of focusing your life on being a as opposed to a drum major or a light or salt only for your own sake, or only for your own church's sake, or only for your own aggrandizement, or those pieces. Instead, to actually do these for the sake of the gospel. And then the question is then, how do we, when we allow the light of Christ to show through us, if we are seasoning the world as Christ would have us season the world, for lack of a better term, how are we actually doing that? How are we living into that? And then what are those pieces? What is the kindness? What is the justice? What is the righteousness? What is the forgiveness? And all of those aspects that are so important that we need to do. So I think it's can easily be tied back to that. And it's a piece too of, I think, Rob, as we're meeting, and as another citizen has been killed by federal officials this last week, the second one to have been killed this month, and the horror of what that is. I think it's also, I have a lot of people who are wondering, like, what should we do? Should we be going up to Minneapolis? Should we be protesting? Should we be doing stuff here? And I think part of that aspect too is, it reminds me, I guess, and pardon me, I'm kind of working this out as I'm saying it. It reminds me of going to the lighting section in IKEA, right? So I go to IKEA all the time. My wife is Swedish. We buy stuff, right? There are thousands of different ways that someone can that we have to show light. And those are just the electric ones, in addition to all of the candles and all of the other things that we have to show light. We don't have a singular light bulb. There's not just one light bulb. There's not just one light fixture. There's not one thing. in the same way that the way in which I allow my light to shine out, because my light is powerful and, as we talked about, and important and all of those things, is going to be different, Rob, than you let your light shine out, which is going to be different from how my church lets their light. Is going to be different from your church. And the question is, are they rooted in the gospel and the good news of the gospel? Not, are we all doing the same thing? Because we do need people that are going to be out there marching and protesting, and we need other people who are going to be calling the representatives, and we need other people who are going to be in deep prayer on this and preaching on it and teaching on it and delivering food to those in need, and a variety of other things. There are going to be a lot of different ways that just to let our light shine or to embody that salt.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I was just at a meeting where we were talking about this, and one person brought up, this is somewhat of a tangent, but when you said that, in fact, if you try to do it all, that's not only are you setting yourself up for failure and burnout and all these kinds of things, but it's also dangerous. Right. So if you're in the public sphere, advocating and protesting and these kinds of things, making public statements, the word that we got today was that there are ICE agents that will hear that and then track that person, knowing that they'll probably lead them to people who are hiding, that they might be bringing people food or bringing people groceries, and you literally, in your helpfulness, can be leading people, blowing people's cover. Now that sounds really like cloak and dagger and, seems extreme, but that's the reality that we're living in. And I don't doubt it either. And so that's, when you talk about, there's times, we shouldn't do it all. And in fact, it's literally dangerous if you try.
Yeah.
And all of this fits so well with I don't want to jump the gun. We still maybe want to talk about Matthew a little bit more, but it fits so well with the Isaiah text.
Yeah.
Right. To let your light shine, the Isaiah text, shout loudly, don't hold back. Right.
Well,
this is what we're talking about.
I think we jump into it. I think we've given Matthew a good shake. There's a lot more.
One thing I do want to say, though, is I feel like the second part of this reading.
Oh, we didn't even talk about this.
Doesn't go with, because it doesn't go with this part. This is the whole problem with this lectionary cut. The other part of the reading goes with the next section, which are the preamble, traditionally known as the antitheses. You have heard it said, but I say to you, the law matters. Jesus is expounding on the law. He's wrestling. Jesus begins this process of the ancient Jewish tradition of wrestling with the law, right? Of Midrash, his own commentary. And this isn't about just taking apart the law, destroying it. It's about digging into it deeper. A.J. Levine calls it putting a hedge around the law, to make sure that you don't do any harm. So put the hedge around it so that you stop even before the harm is possible. Yeah. But it's just a shame that I feel like, again, this is where I really don't like how the lectionary cuts up this passage, because I feel like it puts the end of this is really the intro to the next part, which we don't get to.
Right. And we won't get to it, and because we have Transfiguration next week. But I do think that that's important. And I would say, if the preacher is not going to comment on the second half, don't do it. Like, don't read it then. Don't just let it sit out there, because it raises a lot of questions. However, I do think that it can make a connection. While it belongs to what comes after, I think it can make the connection, which is, as we're talking about what it means to let the light of Christ to shine through us, it's a question too of, it's not just, again, following the letter of the law, because what we're immediately going to hear is that, and what Jesus is going to say is, this whole thing concludes with the golden rule in Matthew 7:12, which also talks about the fact that golden rule is built on the law and the prophets. We say this every time in our church, which is, and upon these laws, what is the greatest commandment under the law? To love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. So it's the piece of all these rules, all these commandments. And I would add to that, Rob, all of our rituals, all of the things that we do in worship, all the things we do in church, all these pieces should be going back to love of God, love of neighbor, love of self, right? Like those pieces. And that's what, as you said, so this is why an eye for an eye, you have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, don't hate, right? You have, you have heard it said that, about adultery, that you shall not commit adultery, but really you shouldn't look at somebody objectively at all. Like, see them as people, not just as uh as
Objects of
things to be
desire.
used, as
Yeah.
objects to be used. So, and there's more of that. So I feel like it can go back. And since we're not going to get the rest of this, it could be a powerful way to understand that just as the Beatitudes lead into what we just did, what we did is going to lead into what's next. And friends, feel free to go in to that whole rest of the all of chapter 6 here, where we're gonna move on into chapter 5 here, the rest of chapter 5 here, where it's gonna be, as you said, this, you have heard it said, but I say to you, you have heard it said, but I say to you, you have heard it said. And you're gonna get a lot of these those pieces in which Jesus seems to be undermining the law, but actually is getting at the root of what the law is talking about. And I think finally, Rob, along with that, is when we hear law, we also have to understand that the law too often refers to Torah, which is also about the instructions, right? It's about living in the spirit of God, the instructions of God. So when we think of like Psalm 1, happy are those who delight in the law of the Lord, it's not just about these rules and regulations, but rather who delight in the way of God. And I think understanding that, again, fits better unites these two passages in today's reading.
Yeah.
There's more. I'm so happy that you brought that up, that we didn't just leave that. There's more, by the way, friends, in all the text and stuff. You can find all of that at pulpitfiction.com. You can also find tons of links to some of the resources that we had mentioned. But right now, it's time for Previously.
Previously on the Bible.
I smell heaven's bakery cooking up something good for you, sister.
So Heaven's Bakery is cooking up Isaiah chapter 58, verses 1 through 12. Shout loudly, don't hold back. Raise your voice like a trumpet. Announce to my people their crime, to the house of Jacob their sins. They seek me day after day, desiring knowledge of my ways, like a nation that acted righteously, that didn't abandon their God. They ask me for righteous judgments, wanting to be close to God. Why do you fast and you don't see? Why afflict ourselves and you don't notice? Yet on your fast day, you do whatever you want and oppress all your workers. You quarrel and brawl, and then you fast. You hit each other violently with your fists. You shouldn't fast as you are doing today if you want to make your voice heard on high. Is this the kind of fast I choose? A day of self-affliction, of bending one's head like a reed and lying down in mourning, clothing in ashes? Is this what you call a fast, a day acceptable to the Lord? Isn't this the fast I choose? Releasing wicked restraints, untying the ropes of a yoke, setting the free mistreated, and breaking every yoke? Isn't it sharing your bread with the hungry and bringing the homeless poor into your house, covering the naked when you see them, and not hiding from your own family? Then your light will break out like the dawn, and you will be healed quickly. Your righteousness will walk before you, and the Lord's glory will be your rear guard. Then you will call, and the Lord will answer. You will cry for help, and God will say, I'm here. If you remove the yoke from among you, the finger pointing, the wicked speech, if you open your heart to the hungry and provide abundantly for those who are afflicted, your light will shine in the darkness, and your gloom will be like the noon. The Lord will guide you continually and provide for you, even in the parched places. He will rescue your bones. You will be like a watered garden, like a spring of water that won't run dry. They will rebuild ancient ruins on your account. The foundations of generations past you will restore. You will be called mender of broken walls, restorer of livable streets.
Fantastic passage. And what a powerful passage for this moment, especially here in the United States and the things that are happening. Before we jump too deep into the text, friends, just an option here. You may hear this and think, oh gosh, I got to preach on this now. Like this is it. Like I preached on, Matthew, but this is such a good text. You can, but also, friends, know that this is the text for Ash Wednesday this year. So Now, I want to be clear, for some, there are different pieces. So like the United Methodist Lectionary is a little bit different. That focuses on Joel 2, which is also a beautiful text, Joel 2, 1 through 2 and 12 through 17. But this is one of the options for the lectionary for Ash Wednesday. I think it's a great Ash Wednesday text. It could also be a good text. Obviously, it's a good text for this one. But if you're torn between the two of like, oh, should I do this? Should I do that? Know that you've got this in your back pocket. You can bring it out again on Ash Wednesday if that fits your tradition. But Rob, what a powerful one. And I have to be honest, when I think of passages like this from Isaiah, I often go early Isaiah 1, those kind of early angry Isaiah. But this vision, which is also so odd, this is not first Isaiah. This is either the beginning, middle of second Isaiah, the beginning of third Isaiah. There's some that argue for three Isaiahs, some that argue for two Isaiahs, potato, depending on how you see it. But this is a post-exilic, or in the process of returning from exile, Isaiah. And it's a fascinating piece because it echoes, for me, I feel like, Rob, it echoes so much of what we had in Isaiah 1, this kind of call to account. And it's almost like, listen, we've gone through the whole exile and you're right back to where you were before the exile. And we're having the same conversation again, which, before we get to, brutal on that, is that not the human condition, right? We do better, then we fall, then we come back. And so, I mean, how much of us, we still need to hear this message? But it is fascinating that we hear this again at this post-exilic moment as an echo of what we heard in the pre-exilic moment.
Yeah, the thought that came to my mind is George Washington and Hamilton. Winning is easy, governing is hard.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Like, okay, so we're going back. Are we going to make the same mistakes? Right. Are we going to do it right this time? We've got, and how many, you can argue about so many different, sci-fi books or post-apocalyptic books where the rebels win, and then what? How, do they just become the same monsters that they're replacing? Do they start to infight? Do they start to, and I think that there's an element here of, okay, we're going home. Don't just do the things you used to do. Don't do what Solomon did, right? Like Solomon, who, was given the land, was supposed to remember that you were a free, you were delivered from slavery. So what does Solomon do? Enslaves people to build God's house, right? I think there's an element of that in this text, and I think it's incredibly timely to say, okay, so what are we going to do? Are we going to learn from history? Right? Are we going to make the same mistakes that we've made over and over again, and or are we going to learn and speak some truth and actually live in justice? And this text would, it does go so well. So the Ash Wednesday text, the gospel text, is the showy religion portion.
Yeah, well, yeah.
This year. Yeah. So it's the, if you're going to fast, don't just put dirt on your face and let everybody know how, but if you're going to fast, then clean your face and make yourself look good, because, that's what really matters. And so this is playing, perfectly with that idea of, are we doing religion for show? Are we following God to look good? Or are we doing it for justice, for compassion? And there's so much here with Christian nationalism and the evil wedding of power, government power and Christian-ish ideas. There's a lot you can unpack with this text. Absolutely.
Yeah. And just the hypocrisy of it.
Right.
I think that's a big, hypocrisy is such a fascinating thing, because it's the only sin, again, that Jesus calls out. Jesus talks about sin and things like that, but he calls out specifically, you hypocrites, right? He doesn't call out really anything else except for that in particular. And I think that it's a powerful piece, the hypocrisy of saying, well, we're people of God, but actually, when it comes down to it, and when it gets hard, then we're not as much. Marvin McMickle in the African American Lectionary has a great piece. Says the quote, "The scriptures are clear on the point that people who are anxious to raise holy hand but slow to extend a helping hand to their neighbors in need will not enjoy God's favor." Right? Goes on, many worship bulletins will have a double heading that appears on opposite sides of the page. Enter to worship, depart to serve. Isaiah 58 is a warning against allowing those two tasks to be separated. We do not enter worship as an end in itself. Instead, our worship should equip us, empower us, and convince us of the service that we must offer in pursuit of a just and equitable society. And I love that idea that it's not that God has anything against the religious aspects. It's not that God is against the fasting and these other pieces, but to only do that, to only say the right words and do the right rituals and not to back them up with the actions of justice and righteousness and risk and all of those pieces is not just fruitless, but it actually undermines the heart of the gospel. It is actually dangerous. It is actually damaging and hurting, which of course makes sense, Rob. If I say this is who I am as a follower of Jesus Christ, and I want to proclaim that with a loud voice and all these things and raise my hands in worship and get a nice cross tattoo and do this. And then what I show the world is that I don't care about those who are marginalized, who are oppressed, who are being shot in the street, who are being ripped away from their family, and 5-year-olds who are being caged and deported and used as pawns to try to deport their parents. Right? If I show that those things don't matter, right, then equally as well, then all I've shown is if this is the representation of Christ, not only am I being hypocritical in my own, but I'm also portraying Christ as hypocritical as well. And that is blasphemy. That is sacrilegious. I want to go one step further and then I'll be quiet for a bit, which is, I think there's also a piece of challenge here that's come out more in the last month, and in the States here particularly, which there should be outrage and outcry about the murdering of Renee Good and Alex Pretty. Absolutely. But I think that there is a strong and notable and faithful response from many Black Americans who say, yes, this is horrific and this is awful, but let's not pretend that this is the first time that federal agents have been assassinating people and killing people. And, we know the names. We know, Michael Brown and Eric Gardner and, Ahmaud Arbery wasn't federal, but still killed, and Trayvon Martin and Breonna Taylor. We know so many others, right? We continue to say those names. And so George Floyd and that litany of names, and to understand that even though it feels like this moment is a particular moment, this moment is a continuation of a broken society. And so recognizing that also sometimes even our outrage and speaking out for justice at times without self-reflection can also be hypocritical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's name Fred Hampton, right? Or
Yep.
These kinds of folks. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and this is so reminiscent of Luke 4 too, right? I mean, this isn't the direct quote, but when we think about what Jesus' mission is, and when he opens up the scroll and says, to proclaim release to the captives and set the prisoners free and recover sight to the blind, that's not a direct quote of this passage, but man, it sure is reminiscent, because this is still our mission. Our worship should lead. And I mean, the fast that God chooses, it's not just the fast, it's our acts of religion, our acts of piety, the way we pray, the way we worship, the way we fast, the way we study, should lead to releasing wicked restraints, untying the ropes of the yoke, setting free the mistreated, sharing bread with the hungry, bringing the homeless into your house, covering the naked when you see them, not hiding from your own family. That's an interesting one. But these are the things that we should be doing, right? Caring for others, housing others, protecting others. This is Christian. This is the basics, right? And so many will say, "Oh, well, the separation of the social gospel and Jesus' gospel is such a false dichotomy." And I think most of our listeners understand that. But a passage like this makes it so explicit and so obvious that what matters is not our worship is empty if it's not leading to these things.
Yeah.
And it couldn't be, again, this is one of those passages that just, it preaches itself because it's so, and it's incredible how timely it is and how needed it is to hear once again today. So much so, read it today and then read it again on Ash Wednesday because it's worth hearing again.
Yeah, fair enough. It doesn't have to be an either or. We can hear it twice. Yeah, absolutely. Well, friends, go check out, there's a lot of show notes, some great quotes, things like that, as well as links to all of those articles and all those pieces. You can find all of that, again, at pulpitfiction.com.
Now that's a tasty wafer.
All right, our tasty wafer brings us back to 1 Corinthians chapter 2, long passage today, chapter 2, verses 1 through 16. When I came to you, brothers and sisters, I didn't come preaching God's secrets to you like I was an expert in speech or wisdom. I made up my mind not to think about anything while I was with you except Jesus Christ and to preach him as crucified. I stood in front of you with weakness, fear, and a lot of shaking. My message and my preaching wasn't presented with convincing wise words, but with a demonstration of the Spirit and of power. And I did this that your faith might not depend on the wisdom of people, but on the power of God. What we say is wisdom to people who are mature. It isn't a wisdom that comes from the present day or from today's leaders who are reduced to nothing. We talk about God's wisdom, which has been hidden as a secret. God determined this wisdom in advance, before time began, for our glory. It is wisdom that none of the present-day rulers have understood, because if they did understand it, they would never have crucified the Lord of glory. But this is precisely what is written. God has prepared things for those who love him, that no eye has seen, no ear has heard, or that hasn't crossed the mind of any human being. God has revealed these things to us through the Spirit, for the Spirit searches everything, including the depths of God. Who knows a person's depth except their own spirit that lives in them? In the same way, no one has known the depths of God except for God's Spirit. We haven't received the world's spirit, but God's Spirit, so that we can know the things given to us by God. These are the things we are talking about, not with words taught by human wisdom, but with words taught by the Spirit. Are we interpreting spiritual things to spiritual people? But the people who are unspiritual don't accept the things from God. They are foolishness to them and can't be understood because they can only be comprehended in a spiritual way. Spiritual people comprehend everything, but they themselves aren't understood by anyone. Who has known the mind of the Lord? Who will advise him? But we have the mind of Christ.
Wow, a lot to unpack here, right? I mean, and it's a tough context to sort out. Still early in the letter, still Paul defending himself, and I think he's defending himself among philosophers, teachers, preachers who might have been much more eloquent, right?
Yeah.
Who might have been more versed in, Greek rhetoric or the philosophies of the world, who might have been much more exuberant or exciting to listen to even. And there's an element here that is Paul saying, what I brought is my life transformed, right? What I brought is what I've experienced in Christ. And, and Christ crucified is not exciting. It's not glamorous. It's not profitable. It is a shameful thing that our Messiah was crucified, as far as the world is concerned. It is a shameful thing. As far as anybody with any decency would know that somebody crucified was not worth following. Because if they were worth following, then they would have been lifted up, right? I mean, that's the conventional wisdom of the time. And so Paul is reminding everybody that I'm not coming here because of this is another form of Paul's famous, sort of humble brags of it's not about me, it's about Christ. And spiritual wisdom matters. And the way you see spiritual wisdom is through the fruits, right? Is through these things that, and I would argue through the things that Isaiah talked about, right? Is through, releasing yokes and caring for others and feeding and all these kinds of things. But it's not about great, well-structured arguments sometimes. It's about revealing compassion and love through our lives and actions and transformed hearts and lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where I feel like this passage does actually authentically work well with the other two passages. Like this is, as you said, this is Paul saying, this is how the light of Christ shines through me. Like this is, it's not me, it's the Spirit. It's the light of Christ coming through me. He doesn't have the gospel in front of him to say exactly that. And he wasn't there, but that's effectively what he's saying is, look at how I've lived, look at what I've done. And for me, for the clincher here, Rob, is exactly that it's not just that Christ, it's that first part here where it says, I made up my mind not to think about anything while I was with you except Christ and to preach him as crucified. Right? This is not the triumphant Christ. It is a crucified Christ. This is a Christ that puts everything on the line for the sake of love and hope and wisdom. And as you just said, for releasing the wicked restraints, for untying the ropes of the yoke, for setting free the mistreated, for sharing bread with the hungry, for bringing wholeness into your house, for understanding that we're going to put it all on the line, and it will lead more often to crucifixion than it will lead to worldly glory. And yet the glory of God is found within the crucifixion. I think that is the powerful piece. This is not an anti-intellectual thing, but rather it's looking at it and saying I was having a conversation earlier with somebody. We were talking about everything that's going on in the world. And one of the pieces that I was saying is, I said, as people of privilege, we were somebody else she was a white, middle-aged, upper middle class person. I said, at the end of the day, we don't have to do anything. And Rob, we don't have to do anything. We don't have to preach against what's going on. We don't have to. In fact, actually, we could preach a far more positive gospel, and our churches more people would be interested in that, right? I mean, they don't want to be, because people generally don't want to be challenged. They don't want to hear those words. And it's not to say that churches aren't growing in things, but there is a piece that says we don't, because of the aspect of privilege, we don't have to do that. And I don't say this to tout you or me or to any of us, but it is the gospel that calls us into those tough places, to speak a hard truth, knowing that there are going to be people who are so upset about hearing the truth, they're going to get up from your pew and you're never going to see them again. And that's heartbreaking and heart-shattering and painful. And we don't do it specifically to drive them out, but we also don't allow those risks to keep us from speaking truth.
Yeah. I think about this too, is, I've heard a lot of people say in different places, well, when did Jesus ever protest against the government? And I think to myself, what is Christ crucified if not a protest against the government, right? That's why Rome crucified him. And it's a protest. It's all Christ crucified is the example of standing in defiance to empire. And it's also nonviolent, right? Christ crucified, not Christ on a war horse. This is Christ riding in on a donkey, right? This is Christ crucified, not raising up an army. This is Christ crucified, not shock and awe, raining down fire and brimstone upon those that this is the nonviolence of Christ that transforms hearts and lives. Christ crucified, when the centurion saw, oh yeah, maybe he is the Son of God, when he was crucified, not because of his power and might. And yet Jesus, and when Paul says, I come with fear and trembling, with a demonstration of spirit and power, the spirit and power is Christ crucified, right? That is Christ's power, is being willing to be nonviolent even to that point. So yeah, this is not an anti-intellect. It's not anti-education. It's not anti-intellectual, but it is an important reminder that this isn't just an academic experience either.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
Preaching isn't just a Bible study or a lecture about the Bible, it should be showing power, the power of Christ crucified, the power of nonviolence, the power of transformation. There is an element of transformation that is involved here. It's not just it's not just an intellectual exercise. That doesn't mean it's not also an intellectual exercise. Yeah. Like, you still need to use your intellect and your intelligence and love God with your heart, soul, mind, and strength. But if it's just mind, that's a problem too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, talking about that idea of spirit and centering, and I feel like this connects really deeply with the Isaiah passage too, which is, it's also centers, what Paul is doing is also says all of those works that we're doing, all these things that we talk about, the freeing the wicked, the setting free the mistreated, the sharing the bread with the hungry, the doing these things, right? That this is rooted in Christ, right? It's not us, it's what we allow Christ to do through us. And this aspect of it invites us into and this is the piece I think that came out so much in this passage, is the deep vulnerability, that it's not Eric's way of fixing it, because our best advocacy, our best plans, our best intentions at times will still fail, Rob, right? That they still will. And yet, in the same way that arguably Jesus, quote unquote, failed by dying, by being crucified. And yet that way of saying, like, but I am rooted in this, right? I do this ultimately because this is where the gospel leads me. And if the gospel leads me to failure, then what the world would consider failure, then that's where it leads me. But it is rooted in what the gospel is. And I think that that's the other piece. It's not simply doing good works for the sake of good works. It's not simply being with our neighbor to simply be with our neighbor, but we do these things because it is the way of Jesus Christ that compels us to it. And we are vulnerable to say, listen, I don't know if I can do this. The only reason that I can go forward with fear and trembling is because Christ went first, and I am rooted in Christ. And it is Christ and the Spirit that draw me into this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's more in the show notes. It's a big passage to unpack, and we've got some great quotes and some other resources there, folks, trying to do that work, and we're thankful for them as well.
Well, we want to thank you all for joining us for this episode of the Pulpit Fiction Podcast, especially if you're joining us for the first time. Thank you so much for being here with us and for joining us. Go and check out pulpitfiction.com. That's pulpitfiction.com. That's where you can find all of our past shows, our exegetical show notes, links to a lot of the resources that we have talked about, all sorts of fun things. Again, that's at pulpitfiction.com. You can also find us on Instagram and Facebook, Pulpit Fiction. You can find us on X at Pulpit F Podcast. You can get in touch with us all those places, and we do want to hear from you. You can always email us, show@pulpitfiction.us. And you can also support the show. We are so grateful. It really helps us kind of keep this thing going with all of your gifts and all of your support by heading over to pulpitfiction.com/support.
You can watch the show every week on YouTube or on Facebook Live. If you go to youtube.com/@pulpitfiction, you can watch live, usually Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Central. We'd love for you also to go and check out our survey. Take some time to fill that out. We would love for you to do that. And if you do, you get entered into a drawing to win a $100 gift card. I want to thank Scott Fletcher for the voice bumpers, Nikolai Heidelis for the transition music, and Brian O'Dean for our closing song. Please have a blessed week.
Hate to say it's time to go, but it happens every time, so now you're free to go about your day. We've heard the word in voice and song, we've wondered and we've laughed along, so go and preach the good news on your way. This is the Pulpit Fiction Podcast for preachers and seekers and Bible geeks. This is the Pulpit Fiction Podcast. We'll see you back next week.